What do you do when the world's going crazy? We've got our government supplying guns to the Mexican cartel. We got kids showing up to school with guns. We've got people coming up to school, crazy people coming up to school and shooting up our children. What do you do when the world's going crazy? I'm attorney James W. Davis, and this is It's the Law Weekend Edition. Hey, Fernando and Crystal.
Hi.
What do you guys think about what's going on with our gun control these days?
Well, I think one of the big problems is the educational issue. I mean, I think at this point you have had so many incidents with guns involving guns that you need to do something, and the easiest thing is probably just ban the guns. No one has a gun, and that seems to be the
That's what a lot of people are wanting to do. Just say, hey, let's drop all the things. Let's look at what our rights are. We got an amendment to the Constitution, Second Amendment to the Constitution. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Crystal, what do you think that means?
I think that our right to carry a weapon is not going to be infringed on, meaning the government is not going to step in and take that right away from us as citizens.
Okay, that's what it would seem to guarantee. We always holler the right to bear arms is a natural constitutional right now, and that's what the Supreme Court has upheld. But one thing I want to look at is the motive of it. It's the need for a well-regulated militia, which is some sort of fighting force. So it's so that the people could fight against. To be a free state, we have to be able to arm ourselves to go up against the government, to go up against anybody that comes against us, including our own government.
Right.
That's part of what we do. So it's interesting now because we're sort of finding ourselves in a peculiar situation. The Supreme Court has said that right is not to the states. You know, some laws that the federal government takes infringe on the state rights, and some are individual rights. And the U.S. Supreme Court has said that is an individual right. That's not Georgia's right to say, hey, we're going to have a well-regulated militia as well. That's individual rights. Each person has the right to bear their arms. We have the right to create a militia together if we were to have, whether it was the Georgia government or the U.S. government or another government from outside the country to have taken control in some way. A lot of people are worried about the Chinese and what they might do because they've got so much financial control of us now. But so I think it's interesting when I think as a reasonable person, if I want to control what guns go into somebody's hands and they say an assault weapons ban, I think about that as being, you know what, a person doesn't need an assault weapon. It sort of sounds sort of rough to have an assault weapon. So sometimes I think it's quick to say, should we take the assault weapon out of people's hands and then just say they have the right to carry a .38 Smith & Wesson, a Colt 45? What do you think what kind of rights do you think we should have as individuals?
I mean, I can't personally, this is an amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. If you're going to say in here, we want to take away all the guns, especially the assault weapons, you know, that's really not going to make sense. It's the person behind the weapon that's got the issue here. You know, I don't think that's necessarily going to cure us all.
Well, the assault weapons ban, as it's sort of been done, it was done under Bill Clinton with a ratification by the Republicans. So it was sort of a joint effort that happened in '94, and it had 10 years, and it was called a sunset provision, where it died after 10 years. So in 2004, we lost that, but nobody ever challenged whether or not they could ban these assault weapons. But they have different labels for what constitutes assault weapon. Automatic weapons, where you pull a trigger and the bullets just continue to fly, those are banned. We have those banned already. But assault weapons are generally semi-automatic, which means every time you pull the trigger, you're going to get another bullet coming out. Those are semi-automatic. Those are a part of an assault weapons ban that they do. And sometimes they just say what it looks like. If you put a handle on it that looks like an assault weapon, if you put the type of barrel on it, if you put the certain scope on it and make it look like assault weapons, then it becomes assault weapons and those are banned. Do you think that's an appropriate method to determine what type of weapon to ban?
Well, I don't think if you're gonna have the right of having a militia and you have the right to have a weapon because you have the right to have a militia, I don't really think there should be any kind of banned arms or weapons. But I do think that there's other countries like Switzerland. They just go, when they turn around 20 or something like that, they go to a program developed by the government and they train them to use those.
Well, we're going to talk about Switzerland in just a minute. So let's hold that off for a second because I want to bring up Switzerland in a minute and what they do. And Crystal, what do you think that that's appropriate to have?
I think it's counterproductive if the government is dictating to its citizens, you can have the right to bear arms. You know, I do think it is a good tactic to say limited to no assault weapons. You know, at least that's a step in the right direction.
That's how I feel. When I think about it as a reasonable person, I think an individual should be able to have some weapons, but maybe assault weapons are appropriate to ban and not allow. But the interesting thing is that that's not really what the Constitution says. The Constitution actually is saying it's for a purpose. Right. It's the reason to have the right to bear arms is for military, type of action. So the way we're sort of interpreting or trying to control it, and it's fortunate or unfortunate, depending on what your belief is, that it was a sort of united measure in '94 under Clinton with the Republicans' help to put this through, because nobody challenged it. So it'll be interesting to what might happen when somebody does try to challenge that. But what I do want to get to what's going on in other countries, and we talk a lot about what Spain, we'll talk about a little bit of that in the next segment. But tell us a little bit about Switzerland. Switzerland is one country has a very interesting method for dealing with that. What is that?
Well, they don't have an army.
Speak up just a little bit louder.
They don't have an army like we do have in most of the countries. What they do is they have a military training for every male, and it's optional for every woman, between 20 and 30 years. And then they form part of a militia all the way to the 50, until they turn 50. So they have a weapon, they carry a weapon that is provided by the government.
So they're actually trained by the government?
They're trained by the government, and the weapons that they have, they are provided by the government.
Wow.
Okay. And what kind of gun safety do they have there? Do they have a generally safer measure in their country, or
well,
what?
the gun control they have in Switzerland is you can have the gun, but you cannot carry the gun unless you're on duty, if it's with bullets in it, if it's armed. So you have to carry your gun on one side and your bullets on some other side. And
so if there's somebody who wants to go in and rob somebody, they could expect that a gun. Are there guns? Do most people have guns?
There's a 35% of the population in Switzerland that has a gun.
35%. Crystal, you had some data a minute ago on the U.S.
Share. In the United States, we do notoriously have liberal gun control laws, but we have the highest gun ownership in the world. But surprisingly, we're not the bloodiest society. South America and South Africa are among the highest, crime rates involving guns. And according to a survey that was done, there's an average of 88 per 100 people that have small arms in our country, in the U.S.
So what percentage of households have guns?
An average of 88 per 100 people. In other words, 88%.
88 people or 88 households?
88 people per 100.
So we've got that's a very high rate if that statistics is right. Okay. And one thing that carry permits. A lot of people want to know whether or not what they have the right to carry, what they have the right not to carry, who has the right. Who do you know of that who doesn't have the right to carry a gun in the United States?
I would say fugitives. Anybody with a criminal record is not allowed to carry.
Okay, that's true. There's a lot of those are one of the main ones. Fugitives, and that doesn't mean a felon. A lot of people know felons are not allowed to carry guns, but also fugitives, people who are fleeing this state to another state, going from one place that may be wanted for some crime or wanted for some reason. They're not allowed to have guns or to carry guns. People who are addicts, people who are addicted to different illegal substances or legal substances. If you're known to be an addict, those are reasons to be denied a right to carry a gun. Felons, generally, most people do know that felons, as a general rule, don't have the right, and even after they're convicted and after it's gone, unless that gets expunged or your rights are reinstated for the rest of your life, you will not have that right. There are methods to reinstate your rights if you're a felon to get those gun ownership rights back in, but if you don't do that, it'll be for the rest of your life. Mentally defective, we'll talk about that a little bit in the next segment. People who are committed to mental institutions, aliens, and that doesn't necessarily mean any alien, somebody from a different country, and it doesn't mean somebody from Mars. But it does, if somebody who's over here that's undocumented, who's over here without the right to be here, they don't have the right to get and to get a gun license or the right to carry a gun. Somebody who's dishonorably discharged by the military after a general court-martial doesn't have the right to. Somebody who might be released from the military for some dishonorable motive that might not apply to them if they weren't court-martialed by that. Somebody who's renounced their citizenship to somebody else, somebody that's court-ordered not to, misdemeanor domestic violence, somebody who's convicted of a domestic violence, even though it's a misdemeanor, may not be allowed to carry, or generally will not be allowed to carry arms either. So those are some of the reasons that people are not allowed to. We're going to talk about different reasons, what we're doing with the educational systems, how we're educating our children, that type of thing in just a couple of minutes. And we're also going to talk about religion and how the Southerners sometimes unashamedly are clinging to our guns and religion. Be back in 30 seconds. It's easy to make the mistake of driving after you've had too much to drink. The consequences for this error can be devastating. You may lose your license even before you've gone to court if you do not take action within 10 days of your arrest. Your privilege to drive, insurance rates, and court costs can all be very expensive. I'm attorney James W. Davis. DUI crosses a large section of society. However, don't take it lightly. Contact my office and let us help you put it all in perspective. Do you feel like you're losing your rights to keep and bear arms? Do you think that that's a right that's protected by the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution? Today we're talking with Fernando Bertolo and Crystal Abney about the rights of gun control and whether or not those should be changed. I'm attorney James W. Davis, and here we start. This is It's the Law Weekend Edition. Fernando, you're from Spain, so tell us a little bit, as we always do. We try to get a little Spain perspective as we talk about the different laws as they apply to the United States. How is it in Spain?
Well, in Spain, it's really different from the States. There's barely anyone that carries guns in Spain, and if they carry it, it's for hunting or sports. But you don't have, unless it's a security profession or something like that, people usually don't carry guns on the streets.
Do they have the right to carry guns on the street?
They have the right to carry guns if they have a license to carry the gun. But unless you're on duty, like if you're working on security or something like that, you can have your gun loaded. But in any other cases, you need to have the guns unloaded. You need to carry the ammunition in one place and your guns in some other place.
And Crystal, what do you think about as a layperson in the United States and the rights that we hear about, our Second Amendment rights, our right to keep and bear arms? We also hear people getting shot up in schools and people killing children. What do you understand as being our fundamental rights as U.S. citizens?
I mean, I think the right to bear arms has always been something that's guaranteed Americans as, citizens the right to do that. It's something that should be protected. I do feel like by keeping the guns off the street in a more protected manner like Spain is doing, we could probably learn some lessons from them as far as our hostility towards each other. The way we use them is just not the right way. So they're getting into the hands of the wrong people, and that's where I feel like we need to sort of pull the reins back in on our country. A lot of people feel like that if we get more gun control, if we do more restrictions on guns, that it will be more likely that the outlaws, the people who are violating our laws already, are the ones less likely to be impacted by that, and the actual law-abiding citizens are going to be less able to defend themselves. What do you think about that? I mean, I think that's an unnecessary fear. Personally, I've seen how people are going out buying guns like crazy, and a lot of the people who are carrying them, their stock has been decreased significantly due to people panicking, and going to purchase all these weapons just to protect themselves because there's such a huge scare now, and I really think that's totally unnecessary. I mean, in a way, I do understand that, but I also think that they're going to get into the hands of the wrong people. I do feel like there is, to a certain degree, a way we need to protect what's going on and protect the right to bear arms, but I still feel like people are getting the guns that are not supposed to be getting them, and I don't feel like the error is in people carrying weapons and, of course, the right people having the weapons. I feel like it's the people who are getting them that are not using them, for the right purposes. Well, that brings us to some of the legislation that's going on. There's a few things that are going on in legislation. One of them is that people who are buying for other people, in other words, what we call a straw purchaser, somebody who goes in and buys a gun, who has the legal right to buy a gun, but they're buying them for somebody who doesn't. Right. So if you or I were to go in and we've got a friend that maybe is a felon or mentally disturbed, and that person wants a gun, and we want to do them a favor because they can't, then we go in and purchase it. Part of the legislation is to make those types of activities have higher penalties. In other words, I believe one proposal is to go to 15 years as a penalty for that, rather than what the present legislation is. Do you think that that's an appropriate measure? I mean, I don't necessarily want to play the devil's advocate here, but I do feel like it's still going to get into the hands of the wrong people, and it's going to be completely impossible to prevent that from happening. You can say it's going to be illegal, but it's almost the same way as saying like using your phone in the car is illegal. People are still going to do it. So, in a way, I feel like you should try to prevent it as much as you can and protect that. But, people are still going to do what they want to do when it comes down to it. At the end of the day, there's no fear.
What do you think, Fernando? Do you think a penalty, a greater penalty for buying a gun for somebody else is an appropriate measure?
I think it is an appropriate measure. It will make people think twice when they're going to do something like that. But on the other hand, if you also have less weapons on the street, you have less inappropriate people to have weapons with them. I think it's just a matter of number of guns, really.
Okay. All right. And one other thing that they're considering now, which apparently both sides are in agreement, are people who have mental incapacity for some reason, people who have some mental illness, something that's affecting the way they think. They were trying to restrict the gun ownership to those people. Do you think that that's unfairly burdening somebody?
Well, I don't think it is. If you're really not mentally able to do certain kind of things, carrying a gun, I think it's something dangerous enough to be regulated. I don't think no one should really take something personal on it. I think it's an accurate law, really.
Right.
Okay.
And in the case of Sandy Hook, these are innocent children that are being harmed, and that's totally unnecessary. So I do agree that what's being done needs to be done. There needs to be stricter gun control laws put in place for our country just to protect our citizens. And I really think we can learn a lesson from other countries who are keeping the guns off the street completely. There has to be some more control here. It's totally gotten out of control.
Okay. And to the school shootings and that kind of thing, what do you think is the major contributor to those, to the things that are going on in our school systems now?
I mean, in my true opinion, we don't have a God-fearing society. We've taken God out of everything in our lives, out of our schools, out of our nation in general, and I'm stepping on a limb by saying that, but I just really feel like people have no fear of anything, and they're just really acting out irrationally.
I think a lot of people have that sentiment as well, where at some point we feel like, as a group, we feel like that the schools have chosen to take God out of it, chosen not to teach morals, chosen not to really teach kids what is appropriate, what's good and bad behavior.
Right.
We have sort of this loose standard now.
Totally.
And it makes a lot of things where it's sort of a dichotomy of, we've got bad things happening in schools. We got not just people coming into schools like the most recent ones, but we've got people in schools carrying guns and shooting people, or the violence that's going on there.
Right.
And we as a society decide intentionally not to teach them right from wrong.
Right. There's too much gray matter out there. That area is too broad.
But in the most recent one, where we have somebody who's not from the school go into the school, one also concern that people have with that is that these schools are supposedly safe havens, no guns allowed, which when a gun gets in there, leaves the people there in those places with no defense.
Right, in jeopardy.
So what do you believe, how do you see that? And coming from a place where there's not generally guns allowed in most places, how do you feel that, where somebody, when they do have one, they're unable to defend themselves?
Well, I really think the major problem is that it's so easy to get a gun, to find out the way to get a gun, that's what makes this problem, in my opinion. But on the other hand, the unsafeness that you feel when you have to go to a weapon-free area and you really need to defend yourself, I think that's easily saved if you just take some more control of what people is taking to school, what students are taking to school, if they're carrying weapons or not into the school before they get into the school.
All right, well, we'll be back in 30 seconds and we'll talk about how some of these people in the South, like us, are clinging to our guns and our Bibles. Let's see how that goes. There's never been a time when more people were struggling with debt. If you find yourself under pressure with potential foreclosure, repossession of your car, or phone calls from creditors that you just can't pay, then you need to know your rights. I'm attorney James W. Davis. We can assess your situation and help you decide whether a bankruptcy or other debt relief may be your answer. Debt relief consultations are free. Come see us and know your rights.
James W. Davis and Associates, attorneys at law.
Clinging to our guns and our religion. That's what we're accused of here in the South, and many of us do it unashamedly. What do you think about that, Crystal?
I think it's a Southern tradition that goes back over hundreds of years, many different centuries. It's just a Southern thing. You walk in the grocery store, you're going to see somebody with a gun on their belt. And to me, I love being a Southerner. I love that feeling of protection. It's part of who I am as a person.
We love feeling we have that right of protection.
Absolutely.
And we also, from a long history, don't always trust our government. And our government, what's our government been doing with guns lately?
Right. I mean, the government is corrupt, in my opinion, at this point. As much as I hate to say that.
We've got Fast and Furious, as we just were discussing a few minutes ago with Eric Holder, and the things that have been going on with there. The government does all these things unashamedly and really unapologetically. They don't come out and say we made an error. They don't come out and say we did that. They actually start this process. And it's not just the Obama administration. I mean, these things started under Bush, and they've been going on from different presidents. But we don't know what the government's doing. And that's one right that we try to hold on to. And that's one right that, as we said earlier, is protected to us by the Constitution. How do you feel about what the government can do with guns when the citizens don't have them, Fernando?
Well, I really think it's interesting having the right to have those and carry those guns as you guys have. But I don't think that's incompatible with having a gun control. I mean, I think you can still have the right of having a gun and carrying a gun, and having a control of who's having that gun and where is carrying that gun.
Right. Well, we do have some controls on it right now, like we were talking earlier about the people with mentally deranged and the people who have felonies and that type of thing. There's certain people who are convicted, certain people who have are non-violent past that we keep the guns out of. So that is a form of gun control in the way that you're using it now. But we're talking about how restrictive regular law-abiding U.S. citizens should be as far as guns. But do you fear, do you have a concern about what Spain's government may do when the citizens don't have a mechanism to defend themselves?
Well, it's been a thing we've been talking lately, and right now at this point where Spain is, I do feel the fear, and I do feel that I wish I had the right to have a guns and a militia like you guys have in the States, because right now the government in Spain is doing what they want, and we don't really have any source to defend ourselves from them. We don't have anything to just say no, stop here and don't go ahead. And you guys at least have that right to organize a militia, and whenever the government try to do something that most of the people are against of, you have the chance to do something.
Right. Now realistically though, I mean, a militia that's organized with our pistols and 38 revolvers and stuff like that, we're going to have trouble coming against any military force, you know, that of Spain or U.S., any military force. Obviously it can be very difficult to compare. But what makes you feel, do you feel good about that, even that it's some force? Is that what makes you feel better about it?
Well, it makes me feel bad about it, the fact that they are the only ones having the guns.
That makes you feel bad about it?
Yeah, that makes me feel bad about it. And they don't let me have that right. I mean, on the other hand, I think it's dangerous, and I do feel a little unsafe when I walk into the grocery and I see a guy with a gun. I don't feel safe that way. I rather go into a Spanish grocery where you know no one's going to have a gun ever. But on the other hand, being able to defend yourself from the government or someone else that's coming from the outside, that's also a good asset.
And let's talk, you also mentioned a minute ago when we were talking about the Bible being taken out of guns, that at least in Spain there's some sort of ethics or morals that are sort of trying to be taught there. What's going on with that?
About 5 or 10 years ago, they started taking out religion from the schools, but they instead of religion they do ethics. They don't just drop religion and you don't have any kind of morals teach on the school. Well, at least I think you need to be taught on some kind of moral, some kind of ideas that you need to go through in your life.
What do you think, Crystal? What do you think? Do you think there's a way to replace religion or godly teachings with an ethics or moral?
Well, I feel like there has to be some sense of right and wrong within the people. You know, if government is of the people, by the people, and for the people, and we want to say we have this right to guns, you know, and if we don't want to exercise it, we won't, and if we will, you know, we'll purchase them and we'll walk in our grocery stores with them and power to the people, then there has to be some sense of moral compass within our society, you know, and at this point it seems like it's lost. This is a nation where, you know, this just violence is being pushed on our society as a whole, and that's what I feel like is where, you know, we're misled.
We're getting taught early, our kids are getting taught early with violence on video games. Their fun is in violence. Now, you know, it's always been people who played, you know, cowboys and Indians, they played cops and robbers, they played soldier. Kids have always played where they're violent types of games, but it seems like the violence has gotten a little bit stronger in the past few years.
Right.
We've got movies and that type of thing that are very disrespectful actually to religious values, and and it seems like a sort of our moral compass as a nation has been somewhat lost.
Right.
Do you feel that way as well?
Oh, totally. And I feel like, this is America. This is the land of opportunity and freedom, and we have men and women dying for our freedom, the right to carry these weapons. But if we don't deserve those rights to carry these weapons, then these men and women have died in vain, and they're serving our country. And, I just feel like that's something we need to really step back as Americans and take a look at what we're doing. If we're supposed to be having it right, we're really not leading the global scene in a positive direction if that's how we really feel and what we're doing.
Right. And what do you think? What do you think is the appropriate measure to control? Like, if we're going to put some sort of ban or some sort of ban on assault weapons or on gun control in general, what do you think is the appropriate measure for that?
I mean, like I said, I don't think there's one cure-all, end-all to this whole grand spectrum of what we're doing, but I do feel like if there's no sense of moral right and wrong here, then, no matter what we do, no matter what we ban, we're still going to come down to, if we don't have a God-fearing society, if we don't welcome him back in our schools, back in our country as a whole, it's in God we trust that this country was founded on, that we have to get back to that.
And you feel like we're losing, a lot of people are feeling like we're losing the in God we trust,
right,
and that everything's going with it. And that's why we need more controls by the gun control to keep the people out of it, because nobody's taught, nobody's adhering to those types of things.
Right, and if we're leaving it up to our schools and they're not replacing what they're taking out with some sort of ethical anything, then what are we doing?
Right.
I don't think there's necessarily one pure and right solution, but I do feel like there's a way for us all to come together and agree on what should be done as a whole.
This is one area where our different rights are sort of overlapping, because we do believe that people have the right to believe differently, that people who have faith, people who believe in God, believe in Christianity or Jesus Christ as being the Savior to God, that there are other beliefs that are out there that are somewhat religious oriented or God oriented or Allah oriented or what have you. And we do believe that all these people, a part of what our belief system is designed to do is to give everybody a chance to know what they believe and to challenge what they believe. But the problem is, as I see it in our society, is we're sort of allowing all of the other beliefs and really sort of saying, as a group, as a society, the media and the school systems, to just disregard the traditional values of Christianity or Judeo-Christian beliefs and that type of thing. And I think that's where our society is really kind of losing a lot.
Right.
But that's where our different constitutional rights start conflicting with each other. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope that above all else you start thinking about what your rights are and what they should be. Our Constitution guarantees us a presumption of innocence. If you've been accused of a crime, do not believe it. When jurors walk in the courtroom, they want to believe that the person in the defendant's chair is guilty. No one wants to believe that a person can be accused of a crime, arrested by the police, jailed, brought to trial by the district attorney, and sat before a judge and jury if they're innocent. I'm attorney James W. Davis. If you've been accused of a crime, you need an attorney who understands that.
James W. Davis and Associates, attorneys at law.
Remember, nothing in this program is designed to be legal advice. If you have a legal concern, you should consult an attorney. You can contact our office, James W. Davis and Associates, at 478-742-1440. Remember to send your legal question to It's the Law at 41NBC.com. And tune in every Wednesday at 6 here on 41NBC, where we'll answer those questions. Also, check out our firm's website at defendmacon.com. I'm attorney Jay Davis, and when it looks like litigation, you need us on your side.